Well, my parents, on my dad's side, came to California from Minnesota. My dad was a World War II veteran in the Army. He was a sergeant in the Army, and he did mostly clerical work because that's what he had studied to do in the States while he was going to Pasadena College in Pasadena, California. And he did so for the Army. He had the opportunity to, he didn't enter the Army till late during the war, and he wound up over in the Philippines and was part of MacArthur's return to liberate the Philippines. I think it was in 1944, and he was part of the return to Corregidor in that area. So that was his participation. My grandfather served in World War I also in the Army. And on my mom's side, they came from Norwegians that settled in Moline, Illinois, mostly. And she was a housewife, and that's about that.
Okay. You were born in California then?
Yes, Pasadena, California, 1947.
Okay. And do you have any siblings as well?
Yes, brother and sister. Both of them live presently in Santa Barbara, California.
Okay. Did any of them serve as well? Or?
No, okay. No.
Would you consider Pasadena your hometown?
Yeah, that's where I was born and raised. Arcadia, Pasadena. I went to Arcadia High School, and I went through the Arcadia elementary and junior high system as well.
Okay.
And it's a small suburb of Pasadena there, east of Los Angeles.
So as you're going through the schooling system growing up in California, what were your original aspirations? Was it always to be in the military, or? Oh, no. I wanted to be in the, like most people that go to California, and having grown up in California, I was enamored with the movie business. I wanted to, when I was growing up, I used to watch the old Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan movies, and they were fun to watch, and they would shoot footage for some of those movies over in the old Los Angeles County Arboretum, and that was less than a quarter mile down the hill from where my family home was. So I would go down there and watch movie crews doing jungle pictures, and Lex Barker, I think, was there, and they did some other movies there, and so that was my real aspiration. And when I got into high school too, but I followed primarily a fine arts course through high school. Okay. Did you go to college?
Yes. I started after I graduated high school. I entered junior college at Pasadena City College, and I did poorly because I was very unmotivated scholastically. And this was during the what I call the hot war period for Vietnam, and people that didn't maintain their college deferments got drafted, and they would drop out of school and wind up with a draft notice, and that more or less happened to me. I found out through the grapevine that I was supposed to be receiving a draft notice because my grades had fallen below a certain point average, and so I came home in the afternoon one afternoon. My mom said, well, I heard from my girlfriend over at the Pasadena Draft Board that you're getting a draft notice tomorrow. And my dad came home and he said, Stephen, you and I are going for a ride, And we got in his car, and he'd just gotten home from Los Angeles, having worked all day at the bank. And we turned around, got in his car, and headed back to Los Angeles. And we went down the Pasadena freeway, and I said, well, where are we headed? A Dodger game? We were coming up on Chavez Ravine, and my dad said, oh, no such luck for you today. And we pulled into the driveway of the Chavez Ravine Naval Reserve Station. And he said, son, you're going to take a physical, pass a test, and you're going to enlist in the Navy. And I said, I thought we were going to see the Dodgers. And he said, no such luck for you today. So that's how I wound up enlisting in the Navy.
What did the rest of your family think about that? Did they prefer that, like going to the Navy over getting drafted to the Army? Or
yeah, they're television, the news items at night in the newspaper. Everyone back home, we were, the general public in general was concerned about the body count, and U.S. servicemen lost. Mostly in the Army, and the foot soldiers, the infantry, and the Marines, casualty numbers were very high. And so when I got up for breakfast the next morning, everyone was relieved that I had enlisted in the Navy. At least they thought, well, you won't be slogging it through some jungle, stepping on bungee sticks in the dead of night, and getting ambushed by Viet Cong or NVA regulars. So, and the thought had occurred to me, it's probably a prudent move. And once again, my dad made a good decision for me. So,
were you in your teens, late teens at this time, or were you 20?
Yeah, I think I was. I think I was just 19. Actually, I enlisted formally. I think it was September, October of 67. I graduated in 66 from Arcadia High School, and so this was the following year. So yeah, they were relieved that I joined the Navy, something other than Army or Marines.
What about your friends, like from college or high school? What were they thinking? I mean, they're probably in the same situations as well.
Yes, absolutely. During senior year, in this day and age, people don't really talk about it. Kids go to high school, and their senior year is, they're more interested in partying and having fun, or, what's the latest thing on YouTube or whatever. Back then, we were concerned about people getting drafted, losing a college deferment. And so those that could enroll and get accepted by a four-year or state college institution did so.
Yeah.
And that's why I went to junior college, just to get a deferment and stay out of the military at the time. I mean, it was not a pretty prospect going overseas. I mean, it wasn't. Casualty losses were so high. And
it's like the complete opposite of what it is today.
I didn't know one high school peer that, maybe one guy I knew, he had every intention of enlisting. He wanted to go over and make the military his lifelong career, but he never made it back. So, yeah, I lost a lot of friends.
Yeah,
from my graduating class, a lot of friends that they went overseas and didn't make it back alive. So.
Did you have to leave anything behind? Obviously you left your family behind when you went into training, but did you have pets or girlfriend or anything like that, I'm going in the military, goodbye, I'll see you when I see you?
Yeah, I had those thoughts. Even though I was entering the Navy, naval service, I did have what I considered kind of a fatalist outlook on all of this, that you got a 50-50 chance of coming back if you go over there. So I had my 1955 Chevy Bel Air. It was a piece of junk car, but it was what I drove around, and I said, "Here, sister, I don't know if I should mention her by name, but anyway, my sister, I gave it to her. I gave away my rock collection and my coin collection to the kid next door because he was growing up and he always came over to look at my coin collection and this and that. When I was growing up, I had all these collections, and I gave all that away, and I had this idea that if I went overseas, it was 50-50, it wouldn't make it back. A lot of people thought that way. You never knew. And as it turned out, everyone thinks the Jersey just cruised up and down the coastline totally unscathed and all that, but we were fired upon on several occasions. And once I was at the helm, and they put an 11-inch short battery, put a projectile right between our stacks, and we were too close to the shoreline at that point. And so we could have been hit, and it would have been, a big boom if we'd been hit. So
before we get into the specifics of like those scenarios, let's talk about initial training. So what was you had to go to Great Lakes to go to training, or did you? No,
I went to San Diego.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to the Naval Training Station down in San Diego, and I was basically relegated to the standard 2-week reservist training. But I was supposed to be transferred. Once I completed that, I was supposed to be transferred or given my release to go back home and then just attend meetings till I was called up for a ship. And but they sent me over to down the road to Pendleton. They sent a bunch of us. I don't know if it was punitive or whatever, but we spent several days at Pendleton.
What was it like being at the first day? San Diego's not that far from LA, about an hour and a half or so. So you're still in your state. Probably you're even familiar maybe with San Diego because it's not that far. But what was it like once you walked through the doors onto that base, into barracks, into training?
Like a lot of people on the bus, I caught a bus and it went from, I think, Union Station down there. My dad put me on the bus. I caught it out of Union Station, downtown LA, and it went straight down there. It was a couple-hour ride, and most of us had butterflies when we arrived. I mean, there was a certain sense of anticipation, a little bit of exhilaration, like, gosh, this is going to be fun, but in the back of our minds, we knew this is not going to be fun. And so it was a lot of apprehension when we went through the gates pulling into the training center there.
Were there any instructors that were memorable, that you remember by name, or anybody that just stood out from training that made an impact on you?
In that photo I showed you, that was from San Diego, where I was standing right above the guy in the blues, the Navy blues.
Yeah.
I was right dead center above him. That was our I can't remember his name, but I think he's listed on there. He was very memorable. He was your typical lifer, hard ass, DI, I think a Marine originally, but he was assigned to train us, and he was fair, but he was a hard ass.
Yeah.
I mean, he was going to put us through the whole 9 yards and not give us any slack at all. He took great pleasure in making our lives miserable for 2 weeks.
Right. What would you say? So you only had to go through a 2-week training? Then?
Yeah, it was short. It was 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, very intense. If I was not, I was either in my rack or at chow, or I was standing watch. We were marching, or we were scrubbing floors, or we were busy 24/7 for 2 weeks, and there was never, I think, 20 minutes before lights out at night. You could write a letter if you were, some of the kids were from Tennessee, Kentucky, all over the country.
Yeah.
And they were writing letters home because they were homesick. My folks were just up the road, so I really never felt any sense of homesickness, except I'd rather sleep in my own bed than where I was. And the food was better at home. But
what would you say the hardest part of that training was? Or what was the most difficult, most challenging thing that you came across when you were there?
Just putting your nose to the grindstone, just not giving up. Just not giving up. Not giving up on yourself.
Right.
You have doubts, gosh, am I going to be able to cut the mustard? Am I going to be able to handle this thing? Can I act this? I mean, I wasn't the most athletic child, and plus when I was growing up, I had asthma. So my stamina on the basketball court was like nil.
Yeah.
So I had to play baseball or something where, I would have a break every once in a while. You have an inning, then you have a break, So some of this stuff took a lot of stamina, constant push-ups, drop down, give me 50, I'll go do this, I'll go do that. And it was nonstop. And it was just, I think the biggest challenge was just not giving up on yourself.
Did you find it difficult to adapt to militarization? Like to get into the formalities and the understanding all the ranks and everything? And
well, understanding was pretty easy. Adapting to it was more difficult. I had no inclination to be a lifelong military guy. I was putting in my time, and I was going to do my service, and then I was going to get out, go back to school, and really apply myself and go get a job. So that was the big picture plan.
Right. But what was it like then when that 2 weeks was up? Did you have to go to any further training, or were you just sent right out to the fleet?
No, I went home, and I did several months of meetings. I didn't get called up till around, I can't remember when I was called up actually, but I think it was like in April of '68. Might have been earlier. I did. That's right. I did get assigned to the USS Halsey Powell, and that was my shipboard training. That was a destroyer escort, and that was during the winter months. So, it's weird. I can't remember the months now. It's mine's at a loss. It's terrible. I can't remember the months, but yeah. I did. I got stationed on the USS Halsey Powell, and I was assigned to the First Division gunnery. We had a 3-inch turret, on the front of the ship, and I was a loader handler loader. I would grab the 3-inch shell and pass it to the loader, and he'd shove it in the breech and throw it, and the gunner would fire the gun. So we did gunnery practice off San Clemente, and then we went down off Puerto Rico, on the island of Vieques, and we did some shelling there. And then in between, we had some R&R in Acapulco. And that's where that little color photo was taken. And but anyway, yeah, we did gunnery practice, and I got my first experience behind the helm. It was just, they rotated us through food prep and fire drills, and we did all sorts of different things. And on one afternoon, I got to get behind the helm, and I liked that. And I found it felt very natural steering a ship. So
was your rate? Were you a gunner's mate, or
I was a gunner's mate striker. Okay. I think I was E2 when I went aboard the Halsey Powell, and they wanted me to go for an E4 rating, and I had heard through the scuttlebutt that if you remained E3 once you did your 2 years of active duty, you could get immediate separation, and you wouldn't have to do all these meetings, do the monthly summer camp and all that as a reservist. So I tried to remain in E3 as long as possible. So, and they didn't like that. They wanted me to go up for rate because I had started college, and they wanted all of us college guys who had any taste of college at all to go up for rate. They wanted advancement, put as many guys in the petty officer corps as possible. So, but I was kind of resistant. So they said, well, okay, so, well, if you don't want to go up for rate right away, then you'll probably be put on a Westpac ship, and my first ship, though, actual ship, was the USS Hooper. That was another destroyer escort, and I was on that for just about a year.
Okay, so the Halsey
Powell was naval training.
It was mostly, mostly training.
Yeah, it was an old ship, to be mothballed, and so they used it for training purposes. But all it had on it was a 3-inch turret. And then they transferred me to the USS Hooper, and that was gunnery also. And I was on that for a year. And once again, they pressured me to go up for rate when I was on the Hooper. And I said, respectfully, I'll decline. So they fixed my goose finally, and they said, okay, you don't want to serve here as a petty officer. We're going to transfer you to the Jersey, and you can have fun shelling overseas. So,
did the Hooper go anywhere, or was it just...
It was local. Yeah, it was local also.
Maybe like a week or two, or maybe even a month, just around California somewhere.
Yeah, we did some sea trial stuff off San Francisco, and I remember having Liberty off San Francisco. I visited my cousin up there. He was a professor at San Francisco State. And I visited him and his wife.
Just out of curiosity, what was the atmosphere like when you went on? Were you wearing your uniform when you went out into town and on Liberty?
Yeah, actually, if we did just Liberty, we were in uniform. Yeah, we had to
What did the public think of you in the middle? Because I know the climate was much different than what it is today. And even in World War II, just a couple decades before that.
There were a lot of expletives and a lot of sign language. I got flipped off a lot, especially in San Francisco, Haight-Ashbury area, the hippie capital of the world. You can imagine what they did. And I was mostly alone because I wanted to visit my cousin, and I had to walk from where me and the rest of my crew, they stopped at a bar downtown, and I said, well, I'm going to go several blocks down and make a right and go up Baker Street and blah, blah, find my cousin. And so while I was alone, I kind of got cornered by some hippies, and they gave me a hard time. Oh, you're part of the baby killer corps, and you'd rather make war instead of make love, and why can't you get into peace, man? Take off the uniform. We'll give you some civvies. We can burn your uniform at the corner of Mason and Baker or something like that. I got a lot of flack from civilians. Back then, it was a very unpopular war.
You do about a year on the Hooper, and now you're getting reassigned to the New Jersey, and this is a ship that's actually participating in the ongoing war.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts about that, knowing that you're going onto a ship that you're no longer going to be just off the coast of California doing exercises?
Oh, yeah, the Hooper was just shelling we were doing like San Clemente and the Coronado Islands. That's what we used for our shelling there. And then they assigned me to the Jersey, and all of a sudden I got this lump in my throat because I realized these are the big guns. This is the real deal, Stephen. It's no more play Navy time. This is the real thing. So when I first got aboard, it was a totally different environment. It was more somber. It was very businesslike.
Were they already overseas, or were
No. The New Jersey was home ported in Long Beach.
Okay.
So once again, I didn't have to go across country to find my ship. It was just 30 minutes down the road from where I grew up. Close by. That was something. So I packed my duffel bag, and it had all my stuff in it, and went aboard, and permission to come aboard, sir. And they brought me aboard, and they looked at my assignment. 4th Division Gunnery. Here we go, Gunnery. I said, okay, more Gunnery. And they said, you ever been aboard a battleship, Sonny? I said, no, I was on destroyer escort. And they said, well, prepare to rock and roll. It's a different experience. So I said, I'll take your word for that. And they were right. It was real get down to business. We did a lot of chipping paint and holy stoning teak decks. And are you familiar with holy stoning, or?
No. You can explain it, and it might help.
It's a limestone brick. It's about that big, and it's a cinder block, and it has a dimple in it. And the dimple goes down about that far into it. And you take a broom handle and you shove it down in there. And then they take a bucket of like spick and span soap suds, and they throw it out on the deck. And you literally sand with the grain, of course, the teak wood. And and you do it in a group. You line up 6, 8, 10, 12 guys wide, and you get in a rhythm.
And that's what the outdoor...
It's like watching the Wizard of Oz and all those guys marching to the castle. Here we go.
Yeah.
And you're sanding off, literally sanding the teak with these holy stones.
That's the whole outside deck, right?
1,000 feet long, or 998 feet in length. Solid teak planks, several inches thick, and the entire, in fact, at least the first two decks, the main deck and the second deck above, I think they were both teak, and then it was metal above that. But they would partition off sections, and 4th Division we were near the aft third turret number 3 aft end of the ship, and we would take care of from that compartment area all the way back to the fantail.
Oh, wow.
And that was our area, and we'd have to holy stone that. And when it finally dried, they would hose it off with fire hoses, and when it dried, it was just like white almost. It was beautiful. I mean, there was a sense of pride in having done a good job. And you always wound up with blisters on your hands until you got calluses. And after about 3 or 4 times over a 9-month period, I got calluses like everyone else, and you stopped getting blisters from doing it. But you took pride in getting it done right.
Was that maintenance that you're doing, that is more than just the boatswain mates? That's basically like, that was all hands on deck, each division had their own assignment? Or were you...
No, mostly the deck apes, as we were referred to one another, boatswain's mates, deck apes, gunnery divisions, first, I think I've forgotten how many divisions we had in gunnery, but I know there were at least like 5 or 6, and between the different divisions, we covered the entire ship. Some divisions, like navigation and certain special operations, of course, fire department, other departments, they did not participate. It was reserved for the boatswain's mates. That was our realm, our domain, just like chipping paint. That was a deck ape chore, and that was part of our work day. And during our cruise, our tour overseas, there would be days when they would be shelling, and we'd be out chipping paint while they shelled. We have earplugs in, most of us. Some of us didn't wear them. But
so were you working in both departments, like on the deck department and in gunnery or weapons? I worked as on deck during my work day, but my particular watch initially was like in the handling area for turret 3. That was initial when we first went overseas. By October 1st, I had volunteered to go to navigation because they'd transferred 3 or 4 navigation personnel off the ship to other ships, and they were short of helmsmen, and they asked for volunteers, anyone with any helm experience, and I had been at the helm of the Halsey Powell and the USS Hooper, both of them. So I volunteered, and so after my work was over, I would go do my navigation watch, which would be usually 4 on 4 off or 6 on 6 off, depending on what evolution we were engaged in at the time. What was it like training to be on the helm compared to the smaller vessels? Oh,
it was different. But in a good way.
Yeah, as if those vessels are even small. They're not even small. This is just much larger.
This was close to 1,000 feet in length, and when you were at the helm, it was a big solid wheel a big solid wheel, like 3 feet in diameter. And when you would get it going, you just developed a feel for it and how the ship answered up. And it's like steering any vessel. You gather, after a while, you gather a feel for it. Halsey Powell, it was I didn't enjoy it. The Hooper, it was all right, but the Jersey had a special feel, and she answered up really nicely. And even in the worst of sea conditions, open sea conditions, you could keep her right on course or within a quarter to a half a degree of heading.
Was it gas powered or was it steam?
No,
I can't remember.
Gosh, I'm trying to remember.
That would change your propulsion.
It was like diesel, I think. I mean, yeah, it was like diesel, huge diesel engines.
Were the engines like very responsive when you were driving them and everything?
Yeah, I only had the opportunity to ring up speeds once or twice while I was up there. I was always on the wheel. And that was only because an officer had requested to take the helm, and I'd step aside and let him do it, of course, if he wanted to.
Yeah.
But the Jersey, she really had a great response, and I think that's my fondest memory of being on the Jersey, is the way she answered up while I was steering her. When we came down here, I got a sailboat, a 25-footer, and we don't have her any longer. We sold her, but she answered up. It would make me think of the Jersey when I was at the tiller on our sailboat, and how nicely she answered up. It reminded me. I'd think back to the Jersey days on the Jersey.
Yeah.
Even when we'd go into a firing evolution, a fire for effect evolution. We'd go to general quarters then, and I wasn't at the helm for that, but preparing to getting in position too, and then they would call for general quarters. It was nice, she just handled beautifully. She was a beautiful ship.
Yeah. Did you have a good relationship with the rest of the team, the navigation team that would be up there, like the cons, the officer of the deck, and the quartermasters and everybody?
Of course, yes. They were, number one, they were generally very well educated, and I learned a lot from them. So I always kept my ears open and my eyes open, because there was always something to learn. And back in CIC, they'd be plotting, missions, and a lot of that was classified, and I had no need to know. So, but I always kept my ears open, because you'd get little details of what was coming up or what had transpired. Sometimes I'd hear a spotter's report after a fire mission was concluded, our effectiveness, how many casualties, how many enemy killed, how many, so there was always some bit of knowledge to glean from being up there. And I respected the job of the officers, especially Captain Snyder and the XO, and I mean, the awesome responsibility, the burden, there was, when we went overseas, there was like around 1,600 crewmen aboard. During World War II in Korea, it had capacity for over 3,000, I think. Yeah, but
still a lot of people.
Yeah, but still 1,600. And if the ship was lost, if it got hit, if one of the turrets got hit, that explosion would go to the handling room, and that would go to the magazine. And we've all seen Pearl Harbor and watched what happens when a bomb hits a battleship. So that's a lot of lives lost at sea. And so the responsibility of the officers there was just, I gained an appreciation for that. And they showed us respect too for the job we did, which you didn't expect or anticipate, but they did. They did, If we were headed in a direction and we were on it for hours and hours, when it was time to shift change or something like that, sometimes the officers say, "Good job, Hall. You kept us right on course. Keep up the good work." I mean, they'd give you an attaboy when you were at it for hour after hour after hour. And so there was a sense of mutual respect aboard the Jersey. Nice. So I felt that.
What about your division, your fellow sailors, shipmates, and your LPO or your chief petty officer? Like, what was the relationship with those individuals like?
It was
a little different, huh?
Yeah. If you were known to be kind of resistant to climbing the ladder, going for grade, not wanting to become E6, they would not appreciate it, and they'd make your daily work chores a little less enjoyable. But when we were off the clock, if we had liberty, we were, there was this camaraderie that was unmistakable. And our BM1, he would drink with the rest of us, and race aboard ship wasn't an issue when I was there. We served equally. And there were, at least I wasn't aware of it, if it existed. There was very little in the way of racial discrimination aboard ship. I'm sure you've seen, Forrest Gump, you've seen Platoon, you've seen Casualties of War. And, I mean, it was a band of brothers. I mean, it was the guy on your left and your right. And we had this one kid in the forward turret 1. I think he was a seaman recruit. He was E1 or E2. He'd just come aboard, and he was down there during an evolution, and the scoop came around and caught his pant leg, and he got pinned up against a projectile.
Damn.
And, I mean, he was getting literally crushed.
Yeah.
And I remember this boatswain's mate first, Hudson, and I have photos of this guy. He was, you know who Rosie Greer was, right? Los Angeles Rams. No. He toured with Bob Hope, and I've got pictures of him in my familygram there.
I'm sure many people
Hudson
know him
was
more than
huge. He was like 350 pounds or something. He was like a football linebacker. Big guy. He went up and he literally moved a 16-inch projectile weighing better part of a ton?
Yeah.
To get this guy released so they could pull him out, drag him out, and get him to our doctors for repair, because he had crushed bones and stuff like this. And, I mean, it was accidental. It's just, it happened. But, and boy, when we got to Liberty and we got ashore, and plus when Bob Hope did come aboard, that was Christmas Day of 1968. Hudson arm wrestled Rosie Greer, It was part of the Bob Hope show.
Yeah.
And they called it a tie, but Hudson beat Rosie Greer. So when we got ashore at our next Liberty, everybody bought him beers. We got him absolutely drunk. He was just, but I'm just saying that it was about the camaraderie, and it didn't matter whether you were black or white. Everybody looked out for everybody else. There were no racial lines.
And the media paints a very different picture of the way the military is now. But I still think the band of brothers and sisters, in today's case, is still ingrained in the servicemen and women, and it's still there, and it's more important. It's more important than diversity or politics or any of that. The world culture. We had a great camaraderie aboard the ship.
So where you start in Long Beach, and when do you know for a fact that you're going to go to support the Vietnam War? Was it the moment you came on board, you already knew you were going there?
Well, we were more or less told this is a Westpac cruise and you're headed for the gun line. But there's been no announcement over the PA to that effect. First, we left Long Beach and went to Honolulu, and we had, I think, 2 or 3 days there. I know it was I had at least 2 days. I think I was aboard ship one day, and the other 2 days I had off. And then from there, we went to Subic Bay, Philippines, along with Ho City. And that was lots of fun. That was very enjoyable.
Did you have to fuel underway while you were there?
We did fueling, food replenishment. We did not have all of our gunpowder bags yet, so we did an armament replenishment also.
Were you ever the helm during that? Or?
Oh yeah.
So you did some of those?
Yeah, once they called for volunteers, and I'm trying to think, I was a helmsman before we reached the gun line. So it was in between Honolulu and, at Honolulu, some of the guys went off.
Okay.
And during one of our replenishments, we sent a couple of navigation guys across in a boatswain's chair.
Wow.
Yeah.
You never see that anymore.
Yeah.
They'll do the
I think I have some of that on those movies that I took.
That's cool to experience that.
We did that. We did fueling, refueling. We did multiple fire drills. We had some UH-1s, like the one out in front of Huey's, come aboard, and some of them had food stores. One time, usually we get it off ships, but some of the times we get it in from Huey's too.
Yeah.
And they'd come in and they'd have a what do you call it? One of these rope things lashed to the struts of the helicopter.
Yeah.
And it would have bags of food or boxes, and it would just land, and we'd unhook it and take off, and so do its next mission. But there's lots of stuff.
What about when you get to the Philippines, you get Liberty? I'm sure you had a good time, but were you again when you go on Liberty in a foreign country now? Are you wearing your uniform out in town, or are you wearing?
Yes. We were supposed to wear our uniform, and there were off-city limits. You could not go beyond certain boundaries, and you had to be in uniform. Mm-hmm. Most of us adhered to that, but after several visits to Subic Bay, you go down to a store and you buy some civvies, and then you go to the bar and you change out of uniform into civvies. It just, you liberate the man, you liberate the mind. It was part of a.
What was that civilian population like? How did they respond to the Americans being in liberty and therefore and?
It was all positive for the most part. There were actually, back then, there was a group called the Hucks, and they were a communist-leaning Filipino sect that rabble-roused, and they did not appreciate the U.S. presence, and they would protest sometimes outside the gates, and they would cause there was like gangland type incidents that would occur, but they were communist leaning, and of course we were there to fight communism for all intents and purposes. So. Yeah, but by and large, all of the local along Coast City, all of the merchants and the restaurants and the bars, every other building was a bar there. So that was pretty much it. And they treated us like kings because we were financially supporting the community, our presence there. We spent a lot of money.
Did you? So when you went on liberty in like San Francisco and maybe even in Long Beach, probably didn't go out in town with your buddies as much. But like when you got to the Philippines, were you going out with friends that you made, whether they were in your division or they were on your navigation team? So were you making those type of friendships with people?
Oh yeah. Oh sure. When we would go ashore, I actually did not, except maybe on one occasion. I didn't party, if you will, with navigation guys. Mm-hmm. They kind of had their own group. I was the extra guy that came up to spot for someone who wasn't there. So I was kind of the odd man out. So when we'd go for liberty, I'd be with 4th Division. I'd be with, Rick Upchurch, and I'd be with Pete and Shuckett and the guys, from South Carolina and Alabama, and all the guys at 4th Division, my actual division, my where I slept every night. Those were my guys, and we would go to the bars together, and I'd party with them. Yeah, we'd stick pretty much together. If you had a girlfriend in town, if you developed, then they'd go off and maybe off city limits or and party separately. But by and large, the guys, the gang from your division, they would party together at the bars.
Did you remain friendly with them after the war? And
no. No. I only I stayed in touch with Reed because he was from Temple City, which was right next door to Arcadia.
Okay.
And John Reed. And I knew him. I had met him at a football game. So we actually had met once before and turned out to be on the same ship. Wow. So, yeah, it was kind of serendipitous. So John and I kind of palled around together, and
okay.
Yeah, but and John, another John Ermatinger, he lived up in Lodi, California, up north in the Big Sur area. He and I corresponded, and we stayed in touch a little bit. But after a year or so, even Reed and I lost touch. And most people from that era, I don't know of anybody who really went out of their way to maintain friendships. We kind of wanted to put that behind us.
Yeah.
And I mean, I never celebrated Christmas with any of them afterward or any of that. I mean, we kind of went our separate ways. I know now it's probably different. People stay in touch and all that, but back then it was a very negative war and very negative, homecoming. And so when people got home, they just kind of did their own thing, went back to school, family oriented stuff. But I didn't remain in touch with guys from the division.
Okay.
I don't know what became of them.
What would you say your favorite part of being at Subic Bay was?
I enjoyed interacting with the Filipinos. I really did. They're a very warm culture. Most of them, I think, are Catholic. So they're very religious and very high moral standards. They really it was very impressive to get to know them. Sometimes if you get to know one of the girls at one of the bars and stuff, if you became familiar with them, once in a while they'd invite you and a couple of your friends back to their home, and they'd cook for you.
Yeah.
And
cool.
Yeah, and you'd eat Filipino food, what they eat, and stuff like that. And that was enjoyable.
Yeah, like the taste of the real authentic experience.
Yeah.
It's definitely unique.
Yeah.
Where do you guys go after Subic Bay? Are you going straight to Vietnam?
Yep. 30 September.
1968?
68, yeah. We fired for effect, yep. And it was a big show of force. It was the first time we fired 9 guns. And that was quite a momentous occasion. We went to general quarters and, gong, 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 general quarters, all man your battle stations, secure, go to condition zebra, secure all hatches. And so we all went to our station. Mine was in the magazines beneath turret 3. I was sitting with all the gunpowder.
The 16-inch gun?
Yeah. And we, they'd already fired them before, but testing wise, but this was full fire for effect. And so I've forgotten what our coordinates were at the time, but they loaded up all 9 guns and fired them, and it was something.
Do you know how long you were shelling the shore for?
Oh, hours.
Just constant.
Oh yeah. Once we started, it wasn't the big guns were not the bad ones. It was the 5-inchers, because they were like a barrel bomb going off in your ear. It had a real crack, and it'd make your ears ring.
Yeah.
The big guns were a belching flame.
For people watching and listening, a 5-inch gun is not a small gun either. A 5-inch gun is very big still.
Yeah, it's big, but relative to a 16-inch diameter thing with rifling, and the projectile stands about 5 feet, close to 60 inches tall, and it's this big around. It's the mass of a Volkswagen Bug, and all that steel going through the air. We would talk with Marines, and they would say, we'd say, "Here comes the super chief." And because it sounded like a railroad locomotive going by. That was the sound it made. It was a whooshing, kind of a whoosh, 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 chugging sound as it went through the air. And then the projectile would go into the ground 30 feet or more sometimes before it would explode.
Wow.
So it would make a big hole.
Did you experience any hearing loss from this?
To this day, I have minor. minor in my right ear. Yeah, about 5%. Not too bad. It's mostly high frequency and my 8,000 to 12,000 decibel range, right in there. That's pretty normal.
Yeah.
But it's the ultra high frequency areas and ultra lows. I lose a little of that. It's not as sharp as it should be.
Yeah.
Like at home, I have to turn the TV up just a little bit extra. Most people watch it at 25%. I got to put it up at 35% to hear it properly. Yeah.
So, you guys go and shell the coast of Vietnam. Was it in preparation for Marines to land, or were you specifically trying to take out targets?
We were spot bombarding. It was a bombardment of spot targets, either provided by aerial spotters in Hueys, and they would receive calls from Marine divisions, encampments, a fire station like Quezon. They would get a call and they would say, "We need fire for effect from New Jersey. We need some support here. We're getting overrun." And we just spot carpet bomb that area, but it would be very pointed and specific. And they would have us leapfrog shells in. They would start us at one end, and we'd 1, 2, 3, and we'd add shells. So, I mean, a massive number of hundreds or thousands of troops coming at that. They couldn't get through the wall of explosions. It would just be like a wall.
Did you guys have to go to just other locations after this initial bombing to do other
Constant
bombing areas, or
constant? When we were on the gun line, we were utilized 24/7.
So how long were you patrolling the gun line for then?
I remember, I think our longest time on the gun line was like 42 days.
Oh, wow.
41, 42 days.
Just back and forth all day, every day.
Constant. Yep. I remember during the Tet counteroffensive, I think it was February 12th or February 15th of 1969. They woke us at 2:30 in the morning, and we started firing. And when the next day came around, 24 hours later, they had to pull us from the gun line because we built up so much brass. 11-inch, like an 11-inch howitzer, I can compare it, or like these 105s they're sending over to the Ukrainians now, but it was on a trailer, and they would roll it up. This is along the coastline, and they fired at us several rounds, 11-inch. That's a big round.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like from like a cruiser size, a full-size cruiser. Anyway, and it went right through our stacks, and when that word got to the captain, Snyder, the old man, he came racing up to the pilot house, and he was expletives, and he said, "Let's get the hell out." 36, 30 degrees right, starboard rudder, all ahead flank. Let's get the flock out of here. And we went quite a few miles out to sea, turned around, and then we leveled a 9-gun salvo at the coastline there, where those batteries had lined up to fire on us. And unfortunately, by the time we got out there and got our coordinates to fire for effect, they had already dispersed. They had shot and run.
Yeah.
And all we did was destroy a beautiful beach. But the beachhead was no more. It had collapsed.
Yeah. Well, then you remove their ability to set back up over
it was just a tree line there. They couldn't get vehicles in there anymore. But that was pretty exciting. I remember that. That was pretty That was the most excitable I had ever seen Captain Snyder.
Where do you go after you're doing this shelling operation?
Sometimes the shelling would subside for several hours. We'd go 30 miles, 40 miles offshore, and they'd take us off station for the night. It was rare. I mean, it was rare that we didn't have some shelling going on almost every night.
Wow.
I mean, it was round the clock. We were there to be used. They used and
How do you get your work done? Like your maintenance and stuff? How did you guys manage?
like I said, we'd be during the daylight hours. They'd be firing. They'd be shelling 16 and 5-inch guns, and we'd be out there chipping paint. Yes,
Just nonchalantly, like.
yeah. We didn't do much holy stoning, but chipping paint. There were certain things, polishing brass, things like that, mechanical. If there was repair on a winch, an anchor chain had to be repaired or something. There was damage to the winch or something. They'd be doing that. And there were things that could be done aboard ship while we were shelling, and we continued to work. Yeah, we had to, because otherwise the rust builds up. I mean, if you let it go for weeks because you're shelling all the time, when you finally get back to like Subic Bay or Yokosuka or one of those places, there's no liberty because you have to do all this deck maintenance. So in anticipation of that, we worked. We wanted to work because, it was a break. It was a break from shelling and anything to break the monotony.
Did you go to Yokosuka before you went to Vietnam?
No.
That was after?
No, that was after, yeah. We went, and we were able to go to Singapore. That was after Christmas. Or no, it was right before Christmas, yeah.
So in between?
It was either right before Christmas, 68, or a few days after Christmas. I think it might have been after.
What was Singapore like? To get away from the war and.
Yeah, it was wonderful. That was my favorite port. I loved it. I loved it so much that when I graduated school 6 years later, I went back to Singapore and had a reunion with the girl I had met in 1969. Yeah, that was quite memorable. But I just love the city. It's so refined. There's the Raffles Hotel and all the beautiful. It was the melting pot of cultures there: Indian, Malaysian, Chinese, even Japanese, and Hindi and Muslim, and all the different cultures there. And there is so much industry. It's a very full of vitality. A lot of very well educated people. It was a really wonderful place to visit. It really was. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
What about Yokosuka? So this is after.
We were there in the winter months. The couple of times we were there. Once we were there to change out barrels. We had literally melted the brass rifling in 3 of the 16-inch guns. They became unusable.
Wow.
Yeah. We had fired while we were overseas, we fired 5,866, if my memory is correct, 16-inch rounds. Almost 6,000 rounds through those guns. And eventually the heat, you pack 500 pounds of gunpowder behind one of those projectiles. And the heat is just, when it would belch out of the end of the gun, you'd see the seawater boiling.
Yeah.
bubbling beneath it. It's just
So Yokosuka was more like a working port rather than
it
Liberty.
was. Yeah, they did retrofitting, high end, heavy maintenance, heavy retrofitting, marine retrofitting, engine. If there was repairs to the engine compartment they needed to do, we do it in Yokosuka. Yeah, anything really big and major overhaul type stuff.
When you weren't doing the shelling of Vietnam and you're not working in the base in Yokosuka and you have leisure time and you have some recreational time, what was something that you participated in that was joyful for you?
Well, just when we could get off the ship, going ashore was always. You're talking about Liberty, or
Yes.
Okay,
Like what you did for fun when you or even on a ship, like what you did for fun.
well, you know what? If we had downtime, if we worked all day long, let's say we're holy stoning, chipping paint, whatever, we get to 4:30, 1600 usually hours, we'd knock off. And that's just time when, off come the T-shirts. A bunch of us would assemble at the aft end near our compartment back there. And there was usually coils of rope, for tying off the ship at a dock or something. And we'd literally plop ourselves into these figure-8 coils of rope and get a suntan. We'd listen to music, tell jokes, usually off-color jokes. We'd read mail. Mail call would usually be at 1600 hours. So someone would play a tape or read something from a letter they got from home. And we generally, some of us would play cards. I lost some money gambling aboard ship a few times. I'm sorry to say I was not a great poker player, but it was fun. Yeah. And so we joke around and stuff like that. But and we do that aboard ship. But at every other opportunity is get off the ship. It's Liberty call, get your dress whites or your tropical whites or your dress blues, wherever you happen to be. Get off the ship, get to a bar, unwind, toss down some shots, tell some jokes, tease some girls, let them tease you. It was great. Young guys sowing wild oats, I mean, that was what we did. Anything to get our mind off what we were doing on the gun line. And we were the lucky ones in hindsight. We didn't have to go into a village after there was a bombardment and pick up the pieces. We never had to do that. Like the Marines, like the infantry, the guys on the ground. We got to go into a port and unwind. What did they have? They would have to go back to their fire station, maybe into the tent, and unwind there. If they had beer in their fire station or cook a steak or something like that, that was great for them. But we had real liberty. We got away from it all. Some of those guys never got away from it until they had leave.
Yeah. You mentioned to me that you became friendly with some of the locals and they took you out water skiing.
Oh, yeah. I learned to water ski for the first time in my life over in Subic Bay. I'd met this one girl, Lilia, and she and her sisters, I think I have a black and white photo of it in my books and stuff. We all went water skiing. They got in their bathing suits. We had swim trunks. And a whole bunch of us guys went with them and some of their girlfriends. And we hired a bunch of jeepneys over there from town, these little gas-powered, like lawnmower taxis. Yeah. And we'd hit every pothole in the road getting out to the coast. And we would sit on the dock there at the coastline, and they'd have a couple of 90 horsepower Johnsons behind a boat, and they'd fire those sons of bitches up, and they'd take off, and we're sitting there, and the rope would go taut. First time I tried it, I swallowed more water than I think I drank half the bay. That was kind of funny, but I learned how to water ski that day. I learned how to water ski. I was doing the whole bay. Before I was done, I came right in for a crash landing on one of the docks too. It was kind of fun. But yeah, I learned to water ski over there. And we did a few other things. They had a place where we could go off limits, but it was a controlled environment, and they would have barbecues out there. And these guys would have these big 50-gallon drums, and they do big barbecues, and they were good at barbecuing. The Filipinos know how to throw a good barbecue. So for the guys that, from the South that really love barbecue, it was great. So we went for barbecue there too. So we did stuff like that. And then we went on some tours when we were in Yokosuka, Japan. We went to see the Imperial Palace. They had tours of that. And we got to see the big giant Buddha, the famous one that's enormous. It's huge. And we went to a geisha house. Mind you, a geisha house is not a house of ill repute. It's not a whorehouse. It's held in a hotel, and they have baths, they have bathing, and they have meals, and they have music. And so we engaged in that, and that took about 5 hours. So we went to a geisha house. It was owned by, I think, the Mitsubishi family. The family, Mitsubishi Automotive, and during World War II they made bombers and stuff. Anyway, it was owned by them. It was in Tokyo, in the Ginza area. But yeah, we went to a real geisha house, and they gave us kimonos to wear when we were all together, and we sat around the cooking area, and they would cook sukiyaki and all these different dishes. They'd cook the meats and the vegetables and the rice, and the geishas would put our plates together and basically feed us, not with chopsticks, we have to do that ourselves, and then in the bath areas you'd bathe and scrub and all that, and then you could get a massage also, like your back, and you get all the tension out. And then after the meal, the geishas would play Japanese instruments, and it was very enjoyable, and you relax, and they would speak Pidgin English, and we would try to speak really, really bad Japanese. Try and learn a few words, but it was fun, and that's what we did when we were relaxing.
You also, there were some funny things that some of the other sailors did on board, climbing up some flagpoles and
tie someone's underwear and oh yeah. There's one time it was during our shellback initiation. They greased the flagpole, and you had to climb up, and if you couldn't get it, you had to go through a dunking tank, and so it was almost impossible to reach the top. So
good old sailor fun.
Yep. Pranks wherever possible.
So we talked before, there wasn't anything that you did for good luck or any rituals, but rather getting mail was something that meant a lot to you and to other people. So can you speak a little bit more about the importance of that? Yeah,
I would say on a day-to-day basis, from an enjoyment or fulfillment standpoint, the best time of day, the best experience we would have on a day-to-day basis was receiving mail from home. And when you had a chance to flake out in your rack, after work or whatever, you go take a shower, get clean dungarees or whatever, and you lay in your rack and you write a letter home. It was just that interaction because it helped you connect emotionally with home. And I think that helps to this day, servicemen now. Just writing home or telephoning home or Skyping home, it's just that connection with home that helps you maintain psychologically and emotionally overseas. Otherwise, if you didn't have that, you'd lose it. And, I mean, especially during World War II, I can imagine those guys, when the mail services were not very good and stuff, I mean, no wonder some of them lost it, And I think most service people come back with some level of PTSD, just from the experience, if they're in the combat zone. It's just, it doesn't always manifest itself at the surface level, but I think internally, most people internalize some of that, and you carry that with you for the rest of your life. It never goes away.
What would you say the best part of your service experience is?
Coming home. Coming home. That was the best part. That was the best part. I think the only other thing that I remember is just being able to steer such a large ship and the way it answered, and just that feeling you're this little spoke in a big wheel, and having that little bit of control over this enormous behemoth,
Yeah.
It was very gratifying.
What about your most proud moment, or what are you most proud of about serving? I know you didn't have really a choice, but...
Well, no, years after I got back, I received when my grandfather passed, he sent me a ring. It was his ring that carried the whole family crest. And when he passed away, he probably should have given it to my dad, but he sent it to me. And he sent it with a small note, and he was dying of cancer, and he was racked with pain and all. So his handwriting was just a scribble. But your grandmother and I were so proud of you for serving our nation at a time in a war that was so unpopular.
Yeah.
And he made mention of that in his final letter to me. And that means a lot. That means a lot. And my dad and mom, they kept a scrapbook all the time I was overseas. And I didn't know about it, of course, till I'd gotten back. And almost a year afterward, my dad brought it out. I said, I didn't know whether to give it to you or maybe after I was gone, but I'm going to give it to you now. I kept this all the time you were overseas. And, he was proud of me for my service. And so, I felt like I did my part.
So you said the best part of your service experience was the day that it ended. Do you recall that day?
Oh, yes. I recall that day. I recall standing my last watch at the helm on May 4th, 1969. Lieutenant Wilcox was the officer of the deck, and he and I were reminiscing about the Westpac cruise, and he said, Steve, what are you going to take, or Seaman Hull, what are you going to take away from this? And I said, well, I think, all of us are coming back with a wealth of experience, some additional knowledge we learned about ourselves, about our fellow man, about people in general, and that we realize how fortunate we are to be Americans and able to serve. But and you can't tell anybody, but tomorrow's my birthday. So, he says, well, if I don't see you in the morning, happy birthday, all. But yeah, we arrived back in Long Beach on my 22nd birthday, May 5th, 1969. And what a birthday present that was.
Wow.
Yeah. So we arrived back, and then I got my separation papers on the 13th, just 8 days later. So I had to commute back and forth. They allowed me to go home for Liberty every afternoon since we were part of Nixon's early release drawdown, and they were trying to eliminate service personnel. So I got to go home after work every afternoon, and then I'd come back. I had to be back by 0800 or 0700 or something.
So you returned back to Long Beach, and it's just a short distance back to Arcadia?
Yeah, it's 30 minutes away.
Oh, wow. So that's
I just hop on the Long Beach freeway and go right up into Pasadena. And
So did you go back to the home that you grew up in?
Well, yeah, the family home. Yeah, that's where I stayed when I first got out, because I'd given everything away except my clothes. My mom and dad had some of my clothes still in the closet, so I had clothes to wear when I got back home. But it was time to start living again, becoming a civilian, and I was looking at I was going to have to apply to college, and I'd have to bring up grades. I have to retake classes that I'd just blown off. And the reason for me losing my college deferment in the first place. So I went and I had to enroll in college and retake classes, and then I got a job. I went to work for an insurance company. That was my first job out of the service, National American Life Insurance. I was a credit investigation clerk. And believe it or not, we used file cards back then, 1969. Everything was kept on file cards. So.
How did your family or the community, how were you received by those people when you came back home?
Well, I think everybody came back generally to a mixture of sneers and jeers, and a limited amount of applause. I think close family members from the community that I grew up in Arcadia, they welcomed me back, and they said, "Welcome home, Steve. Thanks for your service," and all that stuff. But it's because of my parents, because they were so close to my parents. But I think most of the families were probably against the war. There weren't many that were for it. So, it was a lukewarm welcome back. While I was overseas, I got a Dear John letter. So when I got back home, there was no girlfriend to welcome me back because she'd moved on. But at the time, it bothered me. I was hurt, but in the long run, it simplified my life so I could get on with life,
Yeah. Did how long was your service in total?
My active service was 20 months, 7 days.
Okay. So relatively short.
Yeah, under 2 years.
Did you ever find it hard to readjust to civilian life? Even though it was only about 2 years or so.
Yeah, I did have some anger issues when I got back. I had anger issues while I was overseas too, and I almost got thrown in the brick one time when I was in Yokosuka, Japan, because I got very, very drunk and did some damage at a bar. And the shore patrol were very sympathetic, which surprised the heck out of me.
Yeah.
But, I had some anger issues when I came back, but physically and emotionally, I was relatively unscathed, and I had a reasonably well-adjusted return, I would say.
Yeah.
Homecoming.
Okay. And you said that you had to go back and reapply or do all these things better than you did last time.
Yeah, I had to make up like five classes, like one full. I had to do redo 2 semesters. I just blown them out. Failed them.
Did the Department of Defense provide you any services to help you?
Yes, I had the Montgomery GI Bill.
Okay.
When I came back. I think back then it was like $361 a month or something, and it paid tuition, and I never had to apply for student loans. Between the GI Bill and working part-time and full-time, I got through college.
Okay.
Without any Stafford subsidized or unsubsidized loans, or like most of the kids today.
Did you join any organizations when you got out? The Legion or VFW or anything?
No. When I got out, no. Like I said earlier, I did not stay in touch with buddies aboard ship, and when I got home, I didn't join any vet organizations. It wasn't till many, many years later that I joined.
Which one did you join?
I joined the American Legion, okay. And I was actually commander of Post 6 up in Moscow, Idaho. American Legion, Post 6. It's the 6th oldest American Legion post in the world, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
I think it was established in 1918. The post number 1 is in Paris, France. So that was opened after World War I armistice.
How do you think the military service experience affected your life overall?
I think positively. I think as my life continued post military service, I think certain doors opened up to me because I had served. I was able to get a job in the aerospace industry with Lockheed. Mm-hmm. Because I had served, because I was a veteran. In applications, employment applications, they gave veterans preference. I was able to buy a home using the GI Bill. I bought my first home that way. I bought and paid off 3 different VA loans during my lifetime. Yeah, I would say, and as I grew older, I've grown older and older and older. And I think people more and more in this day and age show a lot more respect for service members. They thank you for your service, you know. Back in the 60s, no one thanked you for your service. Yeah. Today they do. So it's yeah, I'm proud of my service. I'm proud of all the guys that served with me, and women, the support. There were women serving over in Vietnam too. Yeah. No one ever talks about it, but they were there. I met some nurses while I was over there. They were, I think, on the Mercy and a couple of the other hospital ships. We were a hospital ship too on the Jersey. We had 3 ORs aboard ship.
Yeah, it's a huge
so we
ship.
We did full-fledged reconstructive surgery aboard the New Jersey while we were overseas. So yeah, I think the respect level that comes to you from serving, I think that's a positive.
So you go back to California, but you mentioned being in Moscow, Idaho, and now we're in Punta Gorda, Florida.
Oh, yeah.
So
I've been all over. Okay. So I came home. I got my degree. I got married to a young lady. I was working in the entertainment industry, actually, and doing TV commercials, editing TV commercials. McDonald's, Kraft cheese, Sunkiss orange, big commercials. And I worked for an editorial house, and I married the boss's daughter. And we were married about 5 years, I think, a little less than 5 years. And we had a son. And then we were divorced. And then I met another woman who I'm still married to, almost 37 years later. And we moved out of Southern California to Northern California, and I went to work for Lockheed Missiles and Space up there in Sunnyvale. And then we moved back 5 years later to Southern California, and then we were there 10 years. Then we moved out to Palm Springs, and we had a home there basically 5 years. And then the market in California hit a pinnacle, and we sold and moved to Idaho because I didn't like where the economy, the politics, the taxes in California were terrible, and so we decided to move out of state. We went to Idaho, Moscow, Idaho. It's the home of the University of Idaho, and it's sister city with Pullman, where Washington State University is. And there I went into banking. I had some real estate experience over the years in California, and so I took up banking in Moscow, Idaho. And then the last 3 years before we moved to Punta Gorda, Florida, I was a veteran service officer for Latah County. And I filed claims for vets. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And then when I was 65, we moved down here, and it's been 11 years now. So,
did you ever find that throughout your travels and throughout your experience that your service impacted or affected the way that you relate to other people, other Americans and other civilians maybe?
Yeah, I do. As a young man, it didn't affect me much, but as I grew older, as I went into middle age and into my senior years, I've carried a sense of pride for my service that I never appreciated as a young guy. We don't appreciate life the same way when you're young. You think you're going to live forever and blah, 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 and you don't have the same values as a young person as you do when you're older. But as I've traveled the world, and I've been to Europe and been to Asia, and my wife and I owned property and built a house in Costa Rica, which we owned for 6 years. And as I got to know those people, they always remarked that, "Oh, you were a soldier. I was a sailor. I was in the Navy, the U.S. Navy. Oh, a veteran. And I can take pride in that when I deal with people internationally. So, yes.
Are there any life lessons that you picked up in your military service, even though it was only 20 months and change? Is there anything that you learned from that time that you carried with you for the whole rest of your life up until now?
We live in the greatest country on the face of the earth, and it's worth defending and serving. I think every young person should spend at least 2 years of service for their country, in some respect, supporting the military or public service or something. Serving a state or federal representative, or just some form of service to the country, because we live in the greatest country on the face of the earth, and everyone should value that and have enough pride to serve. Give something of yourself to something greater than yourself.
When you were in high school and briefly in college, the war is going on, but you also from history know that there was a Revolutionary War and Spanish American and Civil War and World War I and II, Korean War, and now Vietnam. Did your perspective change about war having actually been in one now? And could it have changed from when you were in high school, when you served, to now? And just maybe it's an ongoing changing feeling of it, but has that changed your general perspective?
When I was a child, I played with toy soldiers in the mud with my brother and our friends, neighborhood kid friends. And it was a big adventurous thing. War was an adventure, and we were going to kick the enemy's ass and all of that. And then you hear stories from your grandfather or your dad, or your dad or your grandfather. They give you a helmet that they wore in their service, and you go out in the backyard and you play Army. And then you watch war movies, and you have a different appreciation for war. That, gee, it might be not as much fun as you thought when you were a child and you were playing at it. And then once you serve and you see the negative effects of war, not only on service personnel, but all the casualties of war, the civilians, the mothers, grandmothers, the people. I mean, look at Ukraine today, the devastation over there.
Yeah.
A beautiful, beautiful place. I've never visited Ukraine, but I've seen pictures of it, and before it was destroyed, and all those beautiful buildings, and they're going to have to rebuild that. And look at World War II. How many decades did it take to rebuild Germany and all these different places that were devastated, by war? It's a terrible, destructive thing. But someone's got to. Freedom's not free. Someone's got to pay the price and serve.
Yeah.
So
I guess that leads me to this next question, which is for future generations, like you mentioned your granddaughter, but even people beyond her who aren't even a thought yet, is there any messages or any words you want to leave for them if they see this video? They stumble upon it on the Library of Congress's website, YouTube, whatever it is, and they come across your interview. What do you want them to take away from your experience and military experience?
I would hope that they would not take the thought of entering a war lightly. Think long and hard about the consequences. If you enter a war, you got to enter it to win it, and nothing else will suffice. And you got to have an exit strategy once you win it. I think we've seen in recent years with Iraq and Afghanistan, you need to have an exit strategy. Mm-hmm. Our time, talent, and treasure, our service personnel, they're not to be taken lightly or wasted on trivial political pursuits.
Yeah.
But if you do have to fight a war to defend ourselves, our nation, or another nation, be in it to win it. Be in it to win it, and have an exit strategy, and don't. When it ends, there will be consequences and sorrows, but don't have any regrets. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think I understand your way of coming from in that sense. Is there anything that you wish people knew more about veterans like yourself or myself and all these other members here that work here? It's just Anything that you wish the general population knew regarding us?
Well, since I retired to Punta Gorda, my wife insisted when I came down here 10 years ago that I couldn't spend my afternoons on a bar stool drinking till I'd pass out. So I had to have a hobby. So I started writing books. And I wrote one trilogy, which was supposed to be about my uncle's life history, but it turned out to be a parallel between his life and my life, and I've incorporated a lot of commentary about the plight of service personnel in Vietnam within my books, and especially the first one, The Measuring Stick. I wrote a lot about the effects on service personnel and how it affects their life after their service, not only while they're there, but life after service. And I hope that people might get a chance to read some of it. They might get some insights about what the real facts of the Vietnam War were. There's a lot of misconceptions about the actual average ages of soldiers back then. They thought they were a lot younger or a lot older than they really were, about what the racial makeup of our service personnel were during Vietnam. And I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions about what really happened over there. And so at least where the Jersey and my experience was, within the book, the fictional novel that I wrote, I tried to clarify some of those things. So some of that can be gleaned from reading my books.
Just thank you, Stephen, for participating in the Veterans History Project. I appreciate taking time on a Monday to come do this with me. As I mentioned, not everybody likes to share their experiences, and as a veteran myself, I think it's important that we do. And I always enjoy sitting down with veterans, especially the Navy guys, because I'm one of them. So I love hearing about stories just like yours.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.